Okay, Hiroki, I'm duty bound by the state of California to ask if you consent to this recording.
Yeah, no problem.
So you and I think we met at one of the A-Life conferences. I've certainly followed your career trajectory. It's been incredibly impressive. But for folks watching this video, because we have a relatively open audience through YouTube, how did you get interested in artificial life? What are your artificial life origins?
Well, my origin to artificial life is dating back to the early 90s. So that's almost like the just a few years after the A-Life was created as official community or conference series by Chris Langton. So that was the first one was in 1987. So I started attending the A-Life conference in 1995 or 6.
Hmm.
That was the first time when the conference came to Japan. So I was a grad student. So yeah, already I was interested in the artificial life. Even before the conference came to Japan, there were a couple of publications in translated in Japanese. So I started reading some pop science type of books that was introducing the new field called artificial life, and I get very fascinated, especially like some classic examples, cell automata and self-reproduction kind of machines. So I get involved in that kind of research, and I first attended the conference, A-Life conference, I believe that was 1996, and then I get hooked. Okay, so this must be the area I want to move into. So that's the beginning.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting actually just tracking the history from the early 90s to 96 in particular is when Margaret A. Bowden put out her philosophy of artificial life. And I think there are a series of books which led towards, as you say, the kind of collective interest of these things. But can you tell, for the audience listening in, what was the field like when you first joined it?
Oh, okay. I have to recall myself because things have changed so much. It was almost like almost 30 years ago, right? So
Yes,
the field was very, very, how can I say, full of excitement back then. So the original idea of synthesizing lifelike behavior has been around so many years. Like a famous example include von Neumann. They worked on the self-reproducing automata. Alan Turing also had a Turing pattern formation mathematical models, and then Barricelli also ran some of the earliest example of computer simulation. So the idea was already there for many, many decades, but it was Chris Langton, the genius, who came up with the phrase artificial life, those two words, and the very clear definition of the field. It's defined as a life as it could be. So that kind of big picture that he very boldly posed to the scientific community, that actually created lots of excitement as well as many criticisms, as you might know. Yeah, many people say this is not science. It's okay, we don't care because we are not doing just the traditional science. It's a science, philosophy, and art, all kind of mixture. So that kind of very interdisciplinary excitement was there. And then many people came in, especially in the first couple of rounds of Artificial Life Conference. Obviously, biologists, evolutionary biologists, chemists, physicists, philosophers, and that kind of mixture was pretty unique, I would say. Even these days, if you go to academic conferences, you don't see that much mixture of different fields, except for Artificial Life Conference. A-Life Conference still carries that kind of craziness. That's why I keep going back to my home ground every year, even though I'm working more on the complex system network science that is becoming more like my main research area. I still feel that artificial life carries the original feeling to some extent.
certainly,
Yeah.
certainly. So the nature of people kind of falling into artificial life, having to be polymaths because you need to know a little bit of biology, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of obviously, computing in some form. So your move to Binghamton, you've been at Binghamton for quite some time. Is that your
Yeah.
your move basically from Japan to Binghamton?
Yeah. That was back in 2006. Again, almost 20 years. Yeah.
Certainly, certainly. Can you talk a little bit, because I mean, through your lens of artificial life and simulation, complex simulation, these things, there's a certain trajectory that Binghamton has had. Can you talk a little bit about where things are currently and where things have come from?
Yeah. So the Binghamton University is relatively unknown in the field of artificial life, but it actually has a very strong connection to that field as well, the complex system science in general. So, for example, you may already know that there was a big systems movement in many different areas of science back in the 90s, 70s, 80s. Computer science, engineering, and psychology, psychiatry, ecology, social studies. They all came together to discuss the the importance of systems approaches. So that was partly driven by George Clear. So he was the faculty member here, the professor at the system science. He is actually the one who created system science program here at Binghamton. That was back in the 70s. So, so yeah, Binghamton has a very deep, authentic roots in the system science cybernetics movement, and also particularly to artificial life. There's Howard Patti. Uh, he is a very well-known guy who studied a lot about the intersection between physics and biology. Especially, he's a physicist, but he studied a lot about how symbolic representation, like a genetic codes or maybe spoken languages, those are the descriptions made of discrete entities that can be, combined together to allow combinatorially large design space. How come the, plain physics would allow system to create that kind of spontaneously creating that symbolic representation? That is really the at the heart of the transition from non-living simple physical system to more digital description-based biological process. So Howard Patti was also the faculty member here. So that's another connection. Yeah.
Fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to talk just because I've been in amongst the code recently associated with your evolutionary swarm chemistry, specifically because I really enjoyed the code
Thank
and
you.
enjoyed talking to other people about but what fascinates me as well is this is what I would call a more traditional artificial life project in terms of the fact you write the code, then you study it for a decade. I think you've published 3 times maybe on the code so far.
Yeah.
Is there another paper coming out based on it currently?
Yeah. So, well, I'm not really actively working on that project, but there is actually one review article coming up. Hopefully, toward the end of this year, or maybe early next year, about the overview of swarm approaches. And of course, I talk a lot about my own swarm chemistry, but there are many other similar approaches already there. And I believe the swarm-based system is a really good platform, so to speak, if someone wants to implement open-ended evolutionary process, because it's very easy to implement, right? Conceptually, computationally, it's very intensive, but conceptually, it's a very straightforward. You have a lot of the individual moving around in the 2D or 3D space. Interaction is very intuitive, and then yet you can create lots of different multi-scale structures. So I think it's a great platform, just like cell automata, many years ago. But now Swarm can be utilized as a novel, template on which many people can implement lots of the open-ended evolutionary process. So that review article is coming in the Royal Society Philosophical Transaction A, the oldest journal in the world. So this is my
Yes.
first time. Yeah, it's coming.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I found it fascinating because my perspective, particularly coming through artificial life in the same kind of time frame that you came into it, was that there would be a lot more practical examples of open-endedness. And this is why I talk with Tim Taylor periodically as well, because he knows the history, but his view is that the mature discussion associated with open-endedness has only come about in the past, 3-4 years. And it was interesting going into this conversation with him because I kind of pointed to your evolutionary swarm chemistry and said, this is where it is. Here are the simplifications that you made, because I've been through the code, obviously. And he wasn't. It's interesting because you mentioned that you had a conversation with him at the most recent Day Life conference. Had the tides turned with regards to his perception of evolutionary swarm chemistry when you met with him?
Well, we didn't talk much about the evolution of swarm chemistry at the Copenhagen, but basically we agree in almost all accounts. So open-ended evolution can be defined in so many different directions, and the people can take different approaches to address what they want to achieve. So I'm more like an easygoing guy. So I just create stuff and then see what unfolds in front of my eyes. Does it look entertaining? If so, I'm happy. So I'm very much like a hobbyist type of A lifer. And there are many more, the more rigorous, more theoretically driven researchers, including Tim Taylor. He is very sharp. in defining the open-endedness. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that kind of approach as well. Yeah. So basically, the open-endedness can be defined as simply the possibility. If the possibility is open-ended, there's some people say, yeah, that's open-ended system. Some other people, want to require more. Like it's possible, and also it is actually, demonstratable, right? So the system actually shows continuous production of novel forms or designs, which is very different, right? So infinite possibility is very easy to define, but creating the actual tangible example that does show the continuous improvement, or it doesn't have to be improvement, continuous change without converging to any static optimum. So that is a very difficult approach. I mean, the attempt, I would say. Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, the use of variability and just the ability to kind of add information through, your simulation. Immediately when I saw that, the code just kind of shone to me that this is the kind of conversation that needs to be had with Tim Taylor
Mhm.
specifically. In
Yeah.
terms of graduates, undergraduates, have any of your students studied this stuff as well?
No. Zero.
No. Oh, interesting.
No,
Interesting.
no.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh,
I
you,
thought
you
you were
thought
rather
I have a lot of
excited when.
students who are studying artificial life? No, no, absolutely not. So these
Wow.
days, students are mostly interested in the practical applications.
Uh-huh.
And some students get interested in the artificial life. I would say they are very, very, rare cases. So most of the students want to study data science or AI, machine learning, to get a job. Yeah. So, and this is universal, not in the United States only, but some other countries I traveled, they are very much looking, into the practical application, how this technology can solve A, right, or B or C, and then they may be for profit. Sometimes they might be more like a non-profit, how to save the world, but they are always looking for practical applications, and I value that kind of student attitude. I definitely support those kind of student research as an advisor. But uh, on the backside of my brain, I always think about something though totally useless, but this is why I became an academician.
Certainly.
So I keep my iLife project, only to myself. Yeah,
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah.
No, when I first inquired about the source code, I thought you were. I mean, this happens with my stuff as well. Someone randomly emails you from out of the blue and wants to do something particularly interesting with source code that you've maintained. The idea that you've continued periodically to study this
Mhm.
is very much what I would akin to artificial life hobbyists in terms of the way that artificial life hobbyists create these simulations.
Mhm.
Do you have another simulation that you're working on of similar capacity?
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm slightly shifting my focus from swarm-based stuff to similar but different hash chemistry. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if you have heard about this. Hash chemistry is yet another artificial chemistry framework, which is more designed directly to address the open-ended evolution question. Swarm chemistry is also really open-ended, but it's not directly answering the research question about open-endedness. And hash chemistry is basically using a hash function in computer science as kind of oracle mechanism, right? So something that is uncomputable theoretically, but you get always the immediate answer. If you put anything into the hash function, in one instant, you get the hash value coming out. So usually we use it for the algorithm development, but I took the hash function as an oracle that you can put any object. It doesn't have to be the single individual. It can be a group of individuals. You can put the entire population to the hash function. It always gives you one number. We don't know how, but so we are utilizing that kind of externalized, you know, God's decision, which is luckily available in the form of hash function to simulate some interesting evolution dynamics. So that is what I have been recently working on for the last couple of years. Yeah.
In my shorthand discussion with Tim Taylor, the increase of complexity, I thought,
Mm,
like, if you can actually measure complexity, see it increase, programmatically. I thought that was but he has other definitions with regards to open-endedness. So, but I
mm.
thought seeing that was kind of distilled down to me, okay, this is the interesting part, which indicates that I mean, when you developed it, did you develop it specifically for open-endedness, or did this come out of your work with the simulation?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
So the notion that this would be used as a tool for people willing to discuss open-endedness, was that part of the original remit, or were you just developing a simulation for your own interests?
No, no, no. So when I was working on the A life, including swarm chemistry, I was not really particularly looking into the open-endedness as a, the question to answer. But it came to me over the many years that this might be actually something that we should look into more carefully. Yeah, especially now that we are looking, into the new era of the AI, right? Generative AI and any kind of AI that is dominant everywhere, and then they are predominantly convergence oriented, right? They want to converge to the right solution at the shortest amount of time. So that is what makes you money, right? Basically. But I am very concerned about that kind of convergence type of mentality that is penetrating everywhere in today's tech world. So this is pretty much the same philosophy as what Ken Stanley. I think that you know him, right? Ken,
Yes,
did
I
you have?
talked with him recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The Ken Stanley, I agree with him 100%. So there should be another form of artificial system design principles that basically intentionally stays away from the convergence or any optimal solution. Instead, there should be a system that keeps exploring indefinitely. So that is the more recent, the interest I developed over the years. So the swarm chemistry was the active project for me until like 2018, and then that's around the time when the open-endedness became the more a popular research topic. So I started switching from the swarm chemistry to hash chemistry to do the more structured scientific inquiry about the open-endedness. Yeah. So it's fairly a recent thing to me.
In terms of relatively recent things as well, it's fascinated me, just as someone who developed simulation, the numbers that came in through COVID initially. It indicated that there were various things going on behind the scenes as well. Can you talk about, as an artificial life creator, what COVID, the observation of population sizes, these kind of things did to you?
Yeah. So you were talking about the COVID simulation I did, or
I was leading into that because my
okay.
perspective as someone who creates simulations
Yeah.
was the data that was coming out seemed to
Yeah.
be missing various bits. It didn't
Yeah.
look natural.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of lead into your experience prior to actually writing your COVID simulation and then through your COVID simulation. So talk about, I mean, was this just an immediate need of your thinking to, show some of the learnings that obviously this field has for an applicable cause? Walk me through those steps.
Yeah. So to be quite honest, at the beginning of COVID-19, I was not quite sure what I could even do anything meaningful in that kind of situation, because I was the pure, the artificial life researcher, complex system scientist, and I personally never had the personal experience to work on something as big and as critical as the COVID-19 pandemic. So my learning experience actually came from the outside. So I wrote a little bit about my experience in the paper, but basically our university administration needed professionals to do the adequate scientifically informed response planning. And then I was not nominating myself, but someone actually knew my phone number, so he let our university president know my phone number, so I get direct phone call from the president. So that's how I started. So, and then obviously I was completely unsure what kind of stuff I could do. But when you receive the phone call directly from the president of your employer, you have to say, yes, I can do that.
Yes.
So that's how it started. And from there, everything developed very, very quickly. And, like a day by day, even hour by hour, so there's so many meetings with people in different divisions, and they have different questions, different, the problem they need to solve. So that, the first year or so, it was a complete tornado of all kinds of information coming in. I was working on this project, and then another day I was working completely different things. Sometimes it was a pure data analysis. Sometimes it's a pure data visualization, but they needed the people who have skills, computational skills, to do that. So Yeah, probably worked on more than a dozen of different projects, small, large, including many different data pieces. But that's how I get involved. So quite honestly, I didn't really have any vision. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any plan to get involved in COVID-19. But I was drawn into that process. Yeah, which was the very, very life-changing learning experience for me. Yeah.
Certainly. Can we unpack that a little bit? Because I talked to Dr. Umi
Mhm.
Khan about your COVID work previously, but the thing that I mean, there's obviously a political component to this thing as well. I mean, it's not without its politics too. So could you talk a little bit about kind of creating your initial data set hypotheses, implementing them,
Yeah.
actually, and let's follow this line of thinking.
Yeah. So this, I think, there are lots of political stuff that went throughout the global and national level, but all the projects we did was actually very much situated in a local area, like almost at a county level or even smaller. So there was no politics. So that's a good thing about working directly with people in a much more regional scale, so to speak. So politics happens at much larger scale, right? But if you are working for people in your local community, that is really your people, right? And then the political color does not really matter. They are actually people living in your community. So you want to help people in our university and county that level. So the total number of people we modeled to range from tens of thousands to maybe 100,000. That's maximum. So that's why I said that there was really no politics here. Politics happened outside. So in some sense, political things that was happening was more like an external environment to which local communities like us needed to adapt, right? So orders are coming from the government. The vaccines that availability changes from time to time. They are all the external variables we need to factor into in our decision making. So we did some simple, epidemic modeling for the county level. That's among the first project we worked on. Nothing special. It was actually, done in Microsoft Excel in
Oh,
3 hours.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't have to use Java or any other fancy programming code. Yeah, because people need to get the answer done in the few hours. So we get the data, just a little bit of cleaning, and then you create some curve fitting. Boom. So this is what we get, and then you can do some simple parameter variation kind of experiment. So very easy for us, in like a 5 minutes task, but still people actually value that kind of very quick and easy numerical exploration a lot. Very helpful for them. Yeah. And we
Certainly.
maybe you have seen my agent-based simulation model of the campus population movement, right? So that one is actually much more intense process. That was done in May, June of 2020. Still, there are so much unknowns, uncertainties about COVID-19. But our university administration needed to know how our campus population community would behave as a baseline. So they need to know that kind of mechanistic models. So that's what we built. It was a very quick and rushed project. Everything was done within 22 days from the beginning. Yeah. Data
Interesting.
collection started, and then until the final delivery of simulation result, it was done in 22 days. Yeah, it's a very rushed project.
How did it inform public health in your area?
Yeah. So I I'm not the guy who actually inform public health people. They
Certainly.
inform us. We also provide feedback. It's more like a collaborative process, right?
Interesting.
So it's more like the really the core working environment. They have data, they have insight, and they have questions, and we have skills, but not enough skills to be honest. But we did our best. So it's information is always going back and forth, and then the questions are always coming from the very localized the groups and the people, for example, and the faculty members in anthropology. They still need to do, or archaeology maybe. They need to still do the site visit to do the some field work. And is it okay to put the student into the microbus and the transport for 2 hours? Nobody knows that kind of question, right?
Yes.
So in that case, even simulation may not work unless you have the supercomputer that simulates all the Navier-Stokes dynamics in the airflow. We didn't have that kind of time. So it was more like a discussion after discussion, looking at some of the recent literature, picking up numbers, quick and easy numbers to have many, many rounds of discussion. Okay, what would be the acceptable risk to us? So it's really no one informs the others, but it's all the different kind of professional working together, information flow laterally, and then we created a collective decision. And decision is not final. We just came up with this working hypothesis. Let's do it. If nothing goes wrong, then we can continue. If something happens, we need to go back to redraw the picture. So I was not a professional that informs the public.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
criteria, though. And I think certainly, do you foresee this as a role that artificial life practitioners should, step forward in circumstances? Do you think that this is a field that can actually yield answers?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, I'm not saying that specifically the artificial life as a research field has a particular advantage in addressing that kind of question, but rather, I always see artificial life is more like a community of researchers and professionals who have unique, open-ended, interdisciplinary mindset. So this community has a lot of power and the potential to make a contribution because we I don't want to offend any other existing scientist community here, but you may imagine some scientists are very, confident, right? We know the answers. We came here to save you guys. That kind of mentality exists in many different fields. Artificial life is not into that kind of culture, right? We know nothing. So that is kind of commonly accepted. Well, biology, it continues to awe us, and it's the source of the, very, awesome, sometimes awful, things coming out all the time. So we know very little. We remain humble. We try to tinker many different things to explore the possibilities. So this kind of culture, I think, is very consistent with that kind of rapidly changing, uncertain situation. We remain humble, but we are very skillful. So we can keep working and then playing around with many different scenarios, to which the A-lifers are very good at, I think.
Certainly.
Yeah.
That's what fascinated me actually about your work in COVID. Do you see, for example, there have been things that have come after COVID, the flus, these kind of things. Do you see similar diseases being used in the same simulation sense, just changing certain parameters?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. As long as the disease is the airborne continuous diseases, and of course the details of symptoms and how they're going to affect to the people's behavior might be different. But as long as it's under the certain condition, like a university campus, similar model can be utilized for the future pandemic preparation. So I hope we are better prepared for the next round. Having said that, yeah, the problem is always coming from people, right? Even though we have the technical toolkits and scientific knowledge about diseases like COVID-19, I'm sure next decade we have another COVID-like pandemic. There will be another huge mess. Yeah, because people never learn. I didn't learn either. So yeah, I think this is a persisting issue that humanity, continue to face. Yeah, including politics.
Without question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So something that fascinates me through COVID as well is what happened to the artificial life community, how it changed basically fundamentally through doing no contact conferences, remote conferences. They were able to bring a huge number of people in who never historically would have had an interest in artificial life. And certainly I was talking with Tim Taylor about the numbers at the last conference, and he said roughly half the people had never been to an A-Love conference prior to that, which I thought was just stunning. I mean, it means that people are coming new into the field, interested in being fascinated, but also they have other areas of interest. They might be ML professionals. They might be a variety of different people that are entering the field. What's your sense with regards to the change in the artificial life community?
Yeah. I think that definitely the online forms of conference for the last couple of years definitely helped reaching out to the new, tech communities, especially. But also, I think the another underlying the situation we are all in is that many people working on the computer science and AI, they are feeling kind of stagnation of the field, right?
Yes.
And of course, the performance of the AI systems are getting better and better, but they keep seeing the same kind of stuff again, again, again. Here's the performance comparison table. These are algorithm A, B, C, D, E. This is ours. Ours are always better, like a 2% increase of accuracy. And many researchers, they are feeling the same way. This is not so interesting. Where was the gem of the AI or computer science in general? People get excited, so they are looking for something else. While they still need to publish in the AI field, they do this for their own work. But many people are now looking at the different approaches to computational process. I guess that's why there's some AI researchers are looking to artificial life as a different kind of professional field where they can honestly explore new ideas without worrying too much about this big effort table of the accuracy and the prediction error kind of stuff. Yeah, it's nonsense in my opinion, right?
Fascinating,
Yeah,
fascinating. It's
yeah,
interesting because I think of Larry Yeager, who I've
mm,
talked with for many years. Also, you mentioned Ken Stanley. I think he's
mm,
there as well. These are two thinkers in the field of artificial life that have severely impacted, probably even made work a lot of the current generative AI,
mm,
large language models. I mean, Ken's work on NEAT and Nero coming into that gives a clear indication that biologically inspired simulations of the mind, as he was doing then,
yeah,
were just a fast, efficient way. It's interesting that the learnings from artificial life can actually be used in these kind of areas too.
yeah,
Explaining that to a member of the public or someone who's in artificial intelligence is slightly more difficult.
yeah,
But I think that's the thing that this field has been able to, through
yeah,
nature inspiration, come to
yeah,
a variety of different conclusions, which are just slightly faster in some regard. I mean, it takes
yeah,
20 years for it to be slightly faster, but
yeah,
I think you know what I'm saying.
yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I think that the artificial life as a field, we are actually facing the really interesting time, right? More people start paying attention to artificial life, and many of the A lives that they're non-traditional approaches to the biological process or intelligence processes. So I hope that in the next couple of the years and then, or maybe decade or so, the field is going to expand more, not necessarily in terms of size, but more like approaches, different kind of people participating in this community, which is good for me. Yeah, in my opinion.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the general format, I typically ask people what their favorite 5 papers are in the field of artificial life. Do you have a top 5?
Oh my goodness. So does it have to be a paper,
It
or it
doesn't.
can
It
be a
could be a
book?
book. It could be a book.
Yeah,
Books
yeah,
are equal. So
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah. I always love the first and foremost. The many people actually consider this not artificial life, but the original Alan Turing's paper
ah,
about
yes,
the Hawking problem back in 1936.
yes,
And why I'm bringing this up in the context of artificial life, because I wrote a paper about his paper, his original proof of the undecidability of the halting problem. It actually discussed a little bit about the self uh, cyclical process, and that actually matches nicely to the self reproduction taking place in the universal Turing machine, even though he never mentioned that kind of stuff. So that's always the go-to place for me, where the original artificial life related concept started. Well, it is related to the universal Turing machine. Yeah, that's by far my best paper, and it's very readable. Yeah, it was written by very young version of Turing. It's well before he got the PhD, so it was a grad student. So therefore, his
interesting.
original paper is very like a blog written by a young mathematician. So it's a very fun paper to read. So of course, and I want to bring up the John von Neumann's famous book about the self-reproducing automata. He didn't really write completely himself. His colleague, Arthur Burks, completed the book after he passed away. So, but that one is the one of the first literature I got when I was still a grad student back in Tokyo. I went to the library, physical library, took a copy, and then made a physical copy. I still have it, the photocopy of the book. So, yeah, that's the two beginning kind of the literature I always appreciate very much. Yeah. So other papers, obviously when the Chris Langton proposed the artificial life, as a field. He discussed a lot about the philosophical, conceptual, and technical frameworks of an artificial life. That is part of the first proceedings of the A-Life conference. And it's getting harder and harder to get a copy of the first three proceedings. So it's becoming also the classic. It's very rare to see the actual paper. Actually, you know what? The first two proceedings are actually very good. Every paper, including the first two proceedings of A-Life conference, they are, really, really good, including Tom Ray's Tierra was also there.
Yes.
But there are many other very influential works. Yeah. So that is already five, I guess.
I think you've got four so far. You've got one
Four,
more.
okay. One more, okay. One more is, so more recent one, much more recent one is probably the review article. Tim Taylor and many other people contributed to discuss the open-endedness. That is back in 2016, already almost 80 years ago. But that actually set the the new subfield. What is open-ended evolution? How you can approach it? There's many subsequent papers that came out after they hosted the open-ended evolution workshop. So I would say that is also the more recent classic paper that I want to add to that five. Yeah,
Perfect.
and of course there are many, many other cool A-Life papers that if we are more specific to the particular target topic, I can give you a bunch of different papers. Yeah,
Certainly. Yes.
Yeah.
We share a couple. Tom Ray, I think, is absolutely critical.
Oh, yeah.
Background in that. But no, it's always fun to hear because you get a person's particular perspective with regards to this thing.
Yeah.
In terms of other topics, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't yet talked about?
So what kind of stuff you have spoke to with other speakers in this series?
Many of them, you just wind, like they're like a clockwork toy. You wind them up and let them go in their particular direction. So we've had, obviously, Tim Taylor on, I think, a couple of times. We've had Ken Stanley. I'm still interested in pulling people, hobbyists out. So we've got a couple of hobbyists who I think will be continuing part of the discussion. But no, it's been interesting because when the podcast was the thing, I did it for 18 years. And I knew the audience. I knew everything about it. This YouTube is completely different. Sometimes people discover the YouTube and say, you did the Bio podcast. Yes, I did. So, but most of the time it's completely new viewers that are just interested in the quality of conversations that they don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for example, Steve Grant was one of the most recent ones. He and I have been friends for about 28 years. In fact, because of our origins in this thing, I have that 28-year experience of just meeting people. So it's always good to get together with old friends and talk about particularly prickly topics. Jeff Ventrella is part of that. Gerald Young, who started this out, very much part of that as well. I think Jeffrey's current work is absolutely amazing.
He does really cool stuff.
The fact that he was expunged from Wikipedia recently just makes me feel like Wikipedia is not necessarily the place for people like Jeffrey Ventrella. I put to the ISIL wiki folk that he needs, if it's removed from Wikipedia, then it needs to at least turn up in the ISIL wiki just to kind of capture it. But no, the conversations I've had, obviously Dr. Adams, Emir Khan on a couple of occasions. Really what I'm doing is going back through my Rolodex, so to speak, and saying, you, for example, you'd be a really good person to have a conversation with.
Thank you very much.
And that's been my experience.
Yeah. So definitely, I want to talk more about where the A-Life is going forward from here. And not necessarily in terms of scientific topic, but more like as a profession. And also at the global scale, as you know, that Alisa is now based in Japan, and Japan seems to be attracting lots of talents from all over the place.
Yes.
There are many cool research labs. I don't know why, but and compared to that, it's kind of sad to me that I'm based on the U.S. now. The U.S. is not necessarily the active place for the A-Life research for many reasons. So funding mechanism might be a little bit too much, pragmatism based in this country. And in Japan, there's a lot more freedom in terms of the choice of topic. And also culturally, maybe Japan is accommodating the idea of creating life from non-living materials. They are more open to that kind of idea. compared to the other Western countries like the US. But
Certainly.
I see that there is a global trend where the A-Life research is getting more active. I see that there are more and more stuff in both the scientific research as well as the applications of A-Life related methodologies to the practical problem solving. There are lots of activities going on in Asia, especially in Japan, I believe. Yeah, I
Certainly.
don't know. Do you see any trend in
So,
where the A-Life type stuff is active right
so
now? Because
Cross
you are
Labs,
based on the Cross Labs, yeah.
Cross
But
Labs
you are based on the
fascinates me.
West Coast, right? Is there
I'm in
any
Las Vegas,
interesting stuff?
Nevada.
Okay.
Still a backwater of the. I did want to talk
Yeah.
about this because
Yeah.
Olaf contacted me recently, and we're going to do one of these talks as well.
Mhm.
Ironically, he has a question from um, Charles Offria of the 2012 period. He was
Mhm.
also at that A-Life conference as
Mhm.
well. So Charles posed him a question, which he wanted me to do in a podcast for, normally about what it takes to make, basically your question to me, what kind of environment does it take to make the artificial life simulations just the next thing that people kind of gravitate towards? I think the history is an important part of that. I'm not sure through COVID whether we've lost the history or lost parts of the history, because the practitioners that are currently developing an artificial life don't necessarily need to have the history. But no, I have a very particular model which is based on my own experience. It has to be open source, has to have a lot of people of interest. But my view is that OpenAI has at least put as have a number of other companies, have kind of put a finger in the air with regards to this kind of development. So it'd be very exciting. I mean, I look to, folks such as Cross Labs just to get a sense of how this thing will, how they're able to do this thing with industry, academia, all these different things pulling in all different directions.
Yeah.
But on the West Coast, obviously, I hear about things as probably as you hear about things. You're probably one of the most active social media, LinkedIn, Facebook connected people I know. It's amazing. I sent you an email, I think at 2 a.m. This evening, and you got back to me pretty quickly. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, but nothing that immediately. I think this is just a continuum. What we've seen is ebbs and flows, and what we're now seeing is something strong coming out of an environment that was, not particularly fertile by some perspective. But actually, if you're willing to do the tilling, so to speak, if you're willing to get the land in a position where it can grow, then I think that's where we are currently with artificial life. But no, it's an interesting. I've in my own work digressed into language being the problem because I've written in C for the past 28 years. I now have a transpiler to take that Java, JavaScript, Python. Rust is the big one that I'm looking to.
Yeah. Rust is getting really
Yeah,
popular now.
yeah. I think these languages, but then it's taking my existing simulation work, porting it through these languages, having potentially new interest based on people that only know Python, and these kind of things. So it's an ongoing process. I've had the luxury of, knowing people such as yourself and getting their particular perspective. But for me, it's just interesting listening. When I hear, talking about COVID with Ken Stanley was just amazing. I mean, here's someone who has seen COVID in terms of being part of OpenAI at the start of COVID. And then at the conclusion of COVID, obviously OpenAI had publicly done a whole bunch of stuff. So,
Yeah.
I think the conversations are critical. It's just maintaining the conversations, which is what I'm trying to do with these video recordings.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And I think that nowadays the A-Life kind of the mentalities and the models approaches are getting more and more popular among the hobbyists. Like if you go to Steam, like the game vendors website, there are so many indie video game developers who are creating essentially artificial life kind of stuff. It's amazing. Some of them are actually amazing A-Life models that I don't even understand what they are doing. So yeah, there are lots and lots of contents related to artificial life type of approaches that is getting into the market, and people get more and more familiar with this kind of simulation models, and some of them are actually playable video games, right?
Mhm.
So it's getting really, really interesting moment. So I never imagined what it looks like if you are born today and you grow up in the next 10, 20 years, what kind of environment they're going to go through. So their psychological framework they developed over the next 10 years or so is going to be completely different, right? They're always immersed in that kind of interactive environment. Many contents are coming from the lifelike, algorithmic process, including, of course, generative AI is very much lifelike. It's what that we imagined as an AI, like back in the 80s. You speak to the computer, a computer talks to you back in a very intelligent way. That is already there. But in addition to that, the actual visuals and the dynamical process can also be based on the more like a biological process. And I think this is becoming more and more common in the next generation's learning process. Yeah. And then I think the boundary between what is life and what is the something we should legally protect, and what is a tool, what is the artifact we don't have to protect them, that boundary can blur in next generation, I believe. Yeah.
Certainly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
23-and-a-half-year-old daughters. I'm constantly aware of their vision of the future.
Yeah.
And basically, I feel like I'm the past and they're the future,
Oh, yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
The discovery of the world in language and
Yeah.
playfulness and humor and all the things that I think are, fundamental. Just been
Yeah.
a joy to watch. And just, as they discover the world with their own particular proclivities, I
Yeah.
find it
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. So I think that's a part of the reason why we, the old timers, still see like things like a cellular automata or those algorithm stuff are very fascinating to us. But to the new generation, that is natural already, probably, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, computational process that produces very natural outcome is already a default for them. So they may not be so impressed. Okay, here's artificial life. Yeah, this looks normal. So what's new, Dad? And then we're going to face that kind of new challenge if A life or AI kind of stuff becomes part of our environment, natural environment. Then what is the next source of interest or excitation? I don't even know. I think I need to talk to those people, what they find fascinating.
Certainly.
Maybe, the classic vinyl record or cassette tapes, they get fascinated by those physical gadgets. In that case, we need to go back to the more mechanical, old-fashioned, cranky artifacts.
Definitely.
We don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Sorry, this
Hiroki,
is not related to actual life, but
no, it's all
yeah,
part of the conversation. That's why I do these
yeah,
things. It's just having a
yeah,
good conversation.
yeah. Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm bound to return to work.
Yeah,
But it's been an absolute pleasure, Hiroki. It would be
yeah,
wonderful to have you on in the future. I think some of the discussion we've had will motivate discussion as
mhm,
well. So
yeah,
I enjoy following your trajectory and just getting a sense of the stuff that interests you. And
yeah,
for listeners, watchers to this thing, Hiroki has the best social media chops of anyone I know. If you want to see photos, if you want to see literally where you are in any given period of time, plus all the interesting academics and people you're interacting with, your feed is absolutely spot on for that.
yeah.
So
Thank you very
I'd
much.
like to recommend that to others.
Yeah,
But it's been a real pleasure to chat today. Look forward to talking to you soon.
thank you very much.
Okay.